to Mao. 2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is way back. Welcome up, Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Matt Moreno. Matt, you and I were here a week ago. The Dodgers were 1-2. They struggled in Colorado. They haven't lost since. They're tied for the best record in baseball. You breathing a little easier today?
Definitely. Obviously they got off to a disappointing start to the season, even though, the Rockies did sort of go on and keep winning after that. So it looked a little bit different than when we first recorded. But obviously, whenever you can kind of sweep series, and especially a 4-game series, you got to kind of tip your cap, even if it did come against a team like the Reds. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're going to get into all that. Here's the plan for today's show. We're going to break down the 6-game winning streak that we sort of referenced, take a look at the competition, take a look at how the Dodgers got there offensively and from a pitching perspective. We're going to look at some of the hot and cold streaks, ask what's sustainable for the Dodgers, a little game of buy, sell, and hold. Are you buying Andrew Heaney's hot start? Are you buying Mookie Betts' cold start? That kind of thing. Then we'll get to sort of what I'm guessing most people are going to be most excited of, which is the Braves coming to town. We've got Freddie Freeman storylines, Kenley Jansen storylines, a little bit of Craig Kimbrell and LCS storylines as well. So we'll get into that. And finally, a mailbag. We got a bunch of questions you guys submitted on Twitter, so we appreciate that. But Matt, let's jump straight in and get to the 6-game winning streak that the Dodgers are on. As we said, they've won 6 in a row. They're tied with the Giants for the best record in baseball. It's been quite the stretch. They're averaging 6.7 runs per game and allowing just 1.5 runs per game. That's pretty good. A +5 on average. They've allowed 3 or fewer runs in 8 of their 9 games thus far, but I would say starting pitching has been the storyline thus far. You look down the list: Andrew Heaney, 4 1/3 shutout; Clayton Kershaw, 7 shutout; Walker Buehler, 5 2/3, 2 earned; Tony Gonsolin, 4 shutout; Urias, 5 shutout; and Heaney again, 6 shutout. On total, 32 innings pitched, 10 hits, 2 earned runs, and 41 strikeouts for the Dodgers starters over the stretch. Matt, I thought starting pitching was supposed to be the weakness of this team.
Yeah, it definitely has been surprising. Obviously, with Kershaw, we didn't necessarily count him as one of the question marks, but to come out of the gate with 7 perfect innings, I don't think anybody would have necessarily predicted that. And it's not a slight on him. It's just, perfect games are difficult. Of course, how that unfortunately sort of was cut short, you guys have covered already. But I think Heaney has really been the biggest surprise, because he was somebody who, when they signed him, obviously we talked about it, that he could potentially be a pretty good contributor, but also if you looked at his career so far, like, it hasn't really gotten on track. He struggled kind of everywhere he's been. So to see him sort of giving those contributions, the level of contributions that he has, especially, against the Reds, where he provided a little bit more length than he did in his first start, was impressive. And honestly, it's going to be needed. And obviously, I don't think he's going to turn in scoreless starts every time out.
Yeah.
But even if he's a back-end starter, so you pencil in 2 or 3 runs he'll allow each game, and that would be fine.
Yeah, and I mean, we didn't even include Tyler Anderson in that group, because technically he doesn't qualify as a starting pitcher, as a piggyback guy, and yet he's been really impressive on the back end of those Tony Gonsolin starts. On the offensive side, Trey Turner, Gavin Lux, Freddie Freeman kind of leading the way offensively. I know Freddie Freeman in most people's minds has struggled, but the numbers are actually starting to get there. He's put together a couple nice performances over the last few days. But as I look at this stretch, Matt, kind of the big picture question I want to ask you is, how seriously do you take this 6-game winning streak? On one hand, this is kind of what you expect from the Dodgers, 7-2. Nobody would have been surprised if you said the Dodgers started the season 7-2. On the other hand, the Reds, if we're being honest, probably one of the worst teams in baseball. Yes, 2 games against the Twins, but sort of a weird series, a rainy, snowy, cold sort of performance there. They've got a couple guys that are injured, or Correa didn't play one of the games. So on one hand, this is what you expect from the Dodgers. On the other hand, how much of this do you write off as saying, hey, you know what, they played a couple of teams that just plain and simple aren't very good?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to take it into account a little bit, but I still, like I said earlier, will posit, sweeping the Twins, I don't want to say it's easy, but 2-game series, like, that could go, it could go any which way, right? You could easily split them. You could easily lose 2 if things, a bounce here, a bounce there. But, to sweep a 3 and especially a 4-game series, in my opinion, it really doesn't matter who the opponent is, but it's difficult, because you look around baseball, like, it just doesn't really happen that often. Teams can typically get 1 game against you because, maybe your starting pitcher has an off night and theirs does well, or, some guy comes up with a big hit.
Yeah.
So again, like, you take it into account, but also, like you said, this is sort of what we expected from the Dodgers. it hasn't quite looked, I think, the way everybody thought it would. There have been kind of the big spike and the big innings here
Yeah.
and there, rather than like the steady production that you would probably expect when looking at this lineup top to bottom.
Yeah.
But the flip side is that's what the Dodgers are capable of. You might keep them off the board for 3 or 4 innings, but then all it takes is a base hit in the fifth, maybe a walk, and then a stolen base, and next thing you know, they've scored 6 runs in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, what do you make of that? Because that has been a big storyline, is the big inning. It feels like every time the Dodgers win, it's not because they score, in 5 different innings. It's because they score 5+ runs. It feels like they've done that about 10 different times. There's some people could look at that and be a little bit discouraged and say, hey, how sustainable is that? We need to get in a more consistent rhythm. And on the other hand, it feels like this is a lineup that is built for that. It's built to have 4 or 5 guys in a row that could all put together hits. And by the way, the Dodgers are one of the worst teams in baseball when it comes to hitting home runs thus far. So are you encouraged or discouraged by the big inning sort of reliance that the Dodgers have?
I guess if I had to pick one, maybe a little discouraged, only because, like I said, I think the lineup has the potential to be just more consistent across the board of a game. But, like you said, this is, I know fans have kind of been a little bit frustrated, but what would you prefer? Like that they just struggle then every inning and don't have the big innings, right? Like,
yeah,
of course this lineup is capable of doing that. And I think, and the players have recognized it themselves, Freddie Freeman being among them. I think Justin Turner even mentioned it. Like, we do recognize and want to sort of get a little bit more of an even distribution, but also again, like I go back to basics. Like, it's unrealistic to expect any team to score 1 or 2 runs every inning of every game, right? Like it just doesn't happen. So I think you have to kind of keep that in mind. I think there will ultimately be a little bit of regression. Maybe it's not 6 and 7 runs each time. Maybe that's 3 or 4 runs that become the quote unquote big inning. But then I think that'll be evened out with, hey, they're scoring, 1 in the first, 2 in the second, and then tacking on maybe at some point.
Yeah, Dodgers currently tied for 21st in home runs, which, again, that's a number I don't think any of us expects to continue. We also don't expect Austin Barnes to be the guy leading that category for very much longer.
I do.
You do. Okay, fair. Fine. Everyone make that note, okay? Matt Moreno predicting Austin Barnes leads the team in home runs. He's expecting that, he says. But here's the interesting thing. The Dodgers have played less games than just about every team in baseball. They're third in runs scored. So, on one hand, I think that's the piece, whereas I'm encouraged by it because the home runs are going to come, all right? Like, the Dodgers are going to finish in the top 5 in home runs in baseball. Freddie Freeman is going to get his. Max Muncy is going to get his. Trey Turner is going to get his. Mookie Betts is going to get his. Who knows? Cody Bellinger might even get his. And when that happens, that's how you tack on the 1 run here, the 2 runs there, is you get a walk and a home run, and all of a sudden it's 2 runs. Right now, the Dodgers are relying on a team that just is not slugging the ball. I don't know what their numbers are from an extra base hits perspective, but the slugging percentage for the Dodgers, I guess 10th in baseball right now, so it's not terrible, but you'd expect more from that. So I'm encouraged. I think there was a quote about, like, hey, once a couple guys get on base, dudes behind them are sort of licking their chops, like, all right, let's go. That's the beauty of a lineup like this. Like, it gives the guys coming up more confidence because they see Trey Turner get on, they see Freddie Freeman get on, and then all of a sudden Max Muncy is coming up like, all right, this guy must be throwing something to hit because everybody's getting on in front of me. There's a confidence, there's a wave that this team is riding with one another. So I guess, my own question, am I encouraged or discouraged? I guess I'm sort of neither. If I had to pick, I'd say encouraged because I think the home runs are going to come. But I think, guess what? The Dodgers are getting done what they need to get done. And like I said, they're averaging a +5 in the run differential per game over the last 6 games. Is that going to continue? No, but as bad as the teams they've played, they are dominating them as well. So let's get into a couple of these players. We've sort of referenced Andrew Heaney, a couple of these guys, but let's play a game called buy, sell, and hold. And basically the way this game works is I'm going to go through some of the batters and then some of the pitchers who have gotten off to extreme starts, either extremely good or extremely bad. And when I say extreme, I just mean maybe unexpected. So yes, Trey Turner is hitting very well. Freddie Freeman is hitting very well. We don't need to play buy, sell, or hold with them because they're basically doing what they've always done. I'm talking about guys who are outperforming expectations or underperforming expectations. And I'll start with you, Matt, and say buy, sell, or hold. Buy means, yes, I think this is sustainable. I think they're going to continue outperforming expectations. Sell means, no, I don't think this is sustainable. I think the trend is going to reverse either positively or negatively. And hold is, give me a little bit more time. I need to see a little bit more of a sample size than in some cases 1 start or 10 plate appearances to keep going here. But let's start just in no particular order, but let's start with Gavin Lux. Gavin Lux is a guy that some people have been higher on than others. I've been predicting him to be an all-star for 2 straight years. This is the first year I'm starting to look a little bit smarter than I was last year. But here's his performance this year. So far, he's leading the team in wins above replacement, almost half a win already. He's hitting .320, a .455 on base, and a .560 slugging percentage. So we got an OPS over 1,000. 9 runs, 5 RBIs, 2 steals, and a home run. Are you buying or selling or holding on Gavin Lux stock right now?
I'm gonna buy it, and maybe he's not gonna maintain the same
Sure.
level he's at now, but I think he definitely will be a productive player for the team this year. His more than just the stats, like we've talked about it, his approach and his confidence just looks completely different this season than what we've really seen. Maybe short of when he first came up after tearing the cover off the ball in the minors.
Yeah.
I think he's settled into a role. I think he's learned how to sort of navigate that, and he is at the bottom of the lineup, and he has said, like, there really isn't much pressure on me because all the guys ahead, like, they're getting on base, they're making it easy for me type thing, and or like he just has to get on base then for the top of the lineup to drive him in. So I think everything, like you said, it's kind of just lining up perfectly for him to have the season that a lot of people expected from a former top prospect.
Yeah, like you said, I'm buying as well. I'm not expecting him to have an OPS over 1,000 all year, but I think the thing with Gavin that we need to remember is it's going to look different with Lux. Lux has a different approach to hitting than a lot of the other guys in the lineup. I would say his approach most similarly mirrors a guy like Trey Turner, where you're going to get a little bit of power, probably not as much as Trey, but Gavin Lux is going to draw walks, he's going to work at bats, and he's going to put the ball in play. He's not a Jock Peterson type when it comes to his approach, and I think we're seeing that work. The .455 on base percentage right now with the .560 slugging, I mean, that's everything you want. He's hitting the ball hard. I would say he's gotten a little bit lucky. I think he's had some ground balls that have found some holes, but that's led to some confidence, which has then led to even more hard contact. So I'm with you. I'm buying Gavin Lux. I've been buying Gavin Lux for a few years. It's nice to see the penny stock that I bought, right after the COVID year. It's nice to see that stock on its way up. Let's go to the next guy. This is a guy that you tell me already, apparently you're buying. Austin Barnes stock. 400 batting average, 400 on base percentage, a 1.000 slugging percentage. He's got 2 home runs and 10 plate appearances. You're buying this to continue for Austin Barnes, Matt? That's what I'm hearing.
No, I'll hold on this one.
Wow,
I think
okay.
we've seen it in the past where it looks like he could sort of become a pretty good backup catcher for them, and then unfortunately, like, there is a drop off, and it's mainly come at the plate. I think he has potential in him to hit better than what we've seen the last few years, because remember, like I brought up in the past, like he took the starting job from Yasmani Grandal in the playoffs, and a lot of that was because he was also hitting very well when Grandal wasn't. So Barnes is capable of doing it. Obviously, I don't think he's going to bat 400 the rest of the year. I don't actually think he'll lead the team in home runs. He'll be close.
He'll be close. Jeez Louise. We're slowly backing off, but emphasis on slowly.
But yeah, I mean, I'll have to hold here to see. It wouldn't shock me if maybe he does have, one of his more productive seasons, but I could also see it going the other way.
Here's the thing with Barnes that's fascinating to me, okay? In 2017, I think this is the year you were referencing, he had played 20 games in 2015, 21 games in 2016. He comes up in 2017. He plays 102 games, 262 at-bats. He hit .290 with an on-base percentage over 400. Now, he just had 8 home runs, but I mean, that told you sort of, this is the type of player that Austin Barnes could become. The high batting average, high on-base percentage, low slugging percentage. Look, and if he could do that and combine it with sort of his ability to play defense, call a game, he was going to be a very, very productive catcher. Now, his ceiling was never going to touch Will Smith's, but like that's a top half of the league, if not better, catcher. Unfortunately for Barnes, his on-base percentage has dropped every year, a high of .353 in 2020. That was a shortened year. But that's pretty good. But then 2019, that number's below 400. 2021, a .299 on-base percentage. So what's fascinating for Barnes is, look, I'm selling the crap out of the power, okay? Like, he's not going to hit that. 8 is his career high, and I might take the under on 8 this year for Austin Barnes, even though he's already got 2 in 10 plate appearances. But as a guy who has been critical of Austin Barnes, and that's mostly because of what he has done in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, which is basically be a low 200s batting average guy, right around 300 on base percentage guy with absolutely no power. He has the on base and the batting average piece in him. Again, I don't think the home runs are going to be sustainable, but as much as it's going to surprise a lot of people to hear me say this, I am actually willing to buy the batting average and on-base percentage piece. Now, all that said, he hasn't walked a single time yet this season. So maybe I should be a little bit more concerned that that's not going to be sustainable. But I'm actually, if you said, Jeff, what are the odds that Austin Barnes hits over 250 this year? I think I would take it. I think I would say, I'll say this. I wouldn't be surprised. I think he has it in him. I don't think that what happened in 2017 is a total fluke, although I've just seen a lot of negativity in 2018, 19, 20, 21, reason for skepticism. And so for you, I mean, like if I gave you that number, 250 on base or 250 batting average, and let's say like a 360 on base percentage, are you taking the over under on those two numbers?
I'll split it. I'll do over on the batting average, but under on the on-base percentage. Because like you said, the walks, I think, would be something that could pull that down.
Okay, but there you go. Some surprising news. Matt says Austin Barnes is going to be among the top 3 to 5 Dodgers in home runs this year, and I'm buying Austin Barnes as a competent major league hitter. Bet you didn't expect that. Cody Bellinger, next on our list. I think his numbers are going to surprise people in how low they are. I think there's been this buzz around how good Bellinger's been. He's hitting 250, on base percentage of 350, a slugging percentage of 375. Those aren't great numbers, but here's the key one. Weighted runs created plus 100 is league average. Cody Bellinger's at 114 right now. Buying or selling Cody Bellinger as an above average hitter this year?
I'll buy that. I think he could be slightly above average. Like he has the potential to get there. In terms of, I mean, wow, that's tough.
114 is his weighted runs created plus. Like, I mean, are you buying that as a number that's sustainable this year? I'll rephrase it and simplify it.
I think so. And he wasn't getting the hits to begin the season, but his at bats, like I said, were looking a little bit better. I think maybe the lack of results potentially started to mess with his confidence and his mind, because then I felt like he started adjusting again. And when he did that, then the strikeouts started coming. But now, we've seen, he obviously hit a home run in Minnesota. We've seen a couple doubles. So he's kind of getting back to maybe, what he could be, but then, swinging on a 3-0 count and he fouled it up, popped it up, like stuff like that. It's kind of like, okay, like we're not quite there yet. And so I think, honestly, like it very much could just be a roller coaster with him the entire year.
Yeah, I had a guy on Twitter saying he liked the aggressiveness of Bellinger swinging 3-0. I couldn't believe it. It was one of the, I mean, like I said, it was unbelievable, and then I immediately corrected myself. Correction, it's very believable. It's just insane to me. Like, why is he swinging 3-0? Because he's done it at least twice this year. And both times he's he's popped out.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, I think, a call coming from the bench. They're giving him the green light, and so I don't know if maybe they're hoping he gets like a fastball down the middle, something to really handle, and it can boost his confidence. But yeah, I mean, those are unfortunate situations when they happen, to say the least.
There's reason for skepticism around Cody Bellinger, and there's a lot of it. But when you look at the StatCast numbers and some of the expected numbers and that kind of thing, I'll just summarize it by saying it's not pretty. Here's what it's got. So I said he's hitting 250. His expected batting average based on all sorts of metrics is 212. He's slugging 375. His expected slugging is 332. He's striking out at a rate that he's never struck out at, the highest rate of his career. His exit velocity is down from last year. His barrel rate is a career low. His launch angle is a career low. So I just look at all those metrics and I say, yes, it's nice. Like he hit a little bit for a few games, then he struggled for the last couple of games now. If he hit 250 this year, I think the slugging percentage ticks up a little bit. I don't think he slugs under 400 this year. But if he could to hit 250 and slug over 400, there's not a single Dodger fan that you shouldn't be disappointed with. I'll put it that way. I just look at this. I think hitting 250 is going to be a real question mark. I know like some of the things look a little bit better, but remember all the times you've seen him hit the ball hard, how many of those have been ground balls? How many of those have been, like less than 10 feet off of the ground? Those are not sustainable for getting hit. So yes, he might be, hitting the ball hard a little bit. I think he has one barrel all season. I'm guessing that was the home run ball that he hit. Yes, he's had some exit velocity numbers that are a little bit high. I don't exactly know the definition of a barrel, but I'm skeptical on Bellinger still. I was worried about my skepticism when he was on that hot streak right in the middle of the 6-game win streak. I'm back to being a little bit more confident. I don't think 114 is a number weighted runs created plus he sustains this year. So I'm selling on Cody Bellinger. Let's get to one or two more hitters here. These are two guys that are on the struggle side of it, and then we'll get to Andrew Heaney and Clayton Kershaw as well. Mookie Betts hitting 206, on base percentage 289, slugging percentage of 265. A friend of a friend of a friend of a friend had a bet where Mookie Betts needed to get a base hit yesterday. Mookie Betts looked atrocious in all 5 of his at-bats yesterday. He did end up walking twice, so I guess that was good. But, man, it looks rough up there for Mookie Betts. Obviously, neither of us are going to buy that Mookie Betts is a 200 hitter. But what do you make of his struggles? I guess I'll put it that way.
It's not too much of a surprise to me. Like, when we've touched on him during the late stages of spring training and then early into the regular season, he was among the players. He was late in getting into Cactus League games for multitude of reasons, and then he wasn't hitting well even when he was playing. He had in Cactus League play specifically, he wasn't very good. He was a little bit better during the Freeway Series, so this isn't too much of a surprise. I think honestly, we haven't really touched on it too much, but with the shortened spring training, I think that was going to really bleed into the start of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And players need, this month, I think, to sort of recalibrate and really get themselves going, because really, not only was it a shortened spring training, but even the lead up to games, like the workouts, you typically can ease your way into, facing live pitching and all that. But they reported first day of camp and were facing pitchers right away. And so I think there still is a little bit of a catching up process. And then again, for somebody like Mookie, who was late getting into Cactus League games. So, excuse me, I think he'll obviously get back to maybe a better level and what we sort of expect, but it's not surprising, at least for me, to see him sort of struggling right now still.
Yeah, I'm selling the struggles. Mookie Betts is going to be fine. We've seen him go through little ruts like this, as you said. He struggled in the spring. It's probably magnified. He got a day off. I believe it was on Saturday to do some work in the cage. As I said, he came back Sunday and looked really, really bad. Even in drawing 2 walks, it was lots of swing and miss. I don't know how many whiffs he had, but it was a bunch. So I'm selling the struggles. I think he'll be fine on that front. One more hitter here, Justin Turner, another guy who has struggled offensively to start, hitting 235, 316 on base percentage, 265 slugging percentage. This is a guy who I keep saying is getting up there in age. It feels like at some point we're going to hit a cliff. Yes, Justin Turner's had a couple big RBI singles the other way. Yes, he's made some solid contact at times. He had a nice double yesterday. Buying, selling, holding on Justin Turner's struggles so far this year.
I'll sell that one as well. And I think, similar to Mookie, I think he might just need this first month of this season to really get himself back into the swing of things. We've seen some of the prototypical stuff that we expect from him going the other way. Like you said, he did have the double, which was, solid contact, kind of not necessarily pulling a pitch completely, but really getting a hold of a pitch. I'm pretty sure it was up in the zone. So, yeah, I mean, I'll sell that, and I think he'll get back to kind of being the steady hitter that he's been throughout his career with the Dodgers.
Yeah, I'm going to hold on Turner. I'm confident. I remember looking back at his numbers from last year and being surprised at just how remarkable he was last year, not only playing the most games, but offensively across the board had really good numbers. But again, I just think, like, with a guy like Mookie Betts, I'm like, he's going to figure it out. There's no doubt in my mind. With a guy like Justin Turner, it's not that I ever will doubt that his baseball mind is there. It's just at some point at that age, your body is just going to stop working and firing at the same speeds that it has been. And so I just want to see a few more weeks and see what happens. Because if we're looking at these numbers 5-6 weeks into the season, there is going to be some level of concern for me. Let's flip it around and go to the pitching. 2 guys that are probably the top storylines if we're talking about the Dodgers right now. We'll start with Clayton Kershaw. You haven't had a chance to talk. Daniel and I did the live show after his near-perfect game. We've talked a couple times since then. He goes 7 perfect in his first start, 13 strikeouts. Are you buying, selling, or holding Clayton Kershaw as not a guy who's going to go perfect all of the time, but a guy who, by all accounts, looks as good as he has ever looked at any point in his career?
Yeah, I'm buying that. I think we've touched on it. Like, I think he's almost hurt by the level that he once pitched at when he was winning the Cy Young awards, the MVP. And it's natural for, like I've said before, for every athlete to sort of experience some decline as they get older, but it's still possible for him to be a very good pitcher. And like we've agreed, you look at number 3 pitchers in baseball, like he is easily the best one. And if you want to even bump it up and say, a number 2 pitcher, he's in that conversation as well. So I think he will have a good season for the team. I think he's healthy. I think, he'll not obviously be perfect in his starts, but he'll be a very good starter for them.
Yeah, Daniel and I talked about this. I'm with you. The only question mark with Kershaw has never been his ability. It's only been his availability, his injury history. We talked about this last year, but if you look at some of his StatCast numbers, 22 starts last year, he was 94th percentile in whiff rate, 97th percentile walk rate, 85th percentile in strikeout rate, and 85th percentile in expected ERA. This is a guy who, at every point of his life when he has been healthy, is one of the best pitchers in baseball. I'm with you. I'm buying it as long as he is healthy. It's not like there's a 3-mile-an-hour velocity drop that's going to change everything. He's already sitting in that 91, 92 range. The focus is on the slider. It's the curveball. It's the new changeup. And as long as all those things are working, I'm buying the heck out of Clayton Kershaw, continuing to be one of the best pitchers in baseball. Maybe a guy on the other side of this coin is Andrew Heaney. 10 1/3 innings pitched so far this year. 0 earned runs. 16 strikeouts. Buying, selling, or holding Andrew Heaney as a really good starting pitcher for the Dodgers this year.
I'll buy that.
There we go.
I think the team, the Dodgers have a history of sort of doing this with pitchers. Heaney has kind of the past pedigree, once being a pretty big prospect. And so I think when you put that together, this is what you sort of get, where, the Dodgers have found something. He obviously has a new sort of sweeping slider that he's incorporated that seems to be really effective for him. And, I think some of this too is the bar was really low for him. So it's easy for me to say, like, I'm going to buy, like, better than what the expectations were. So he can, regress a little bit, but still be above, I think, what fans kind of the Dodgers did.
Yes, Sunday's start was sort of the first time that I got real eyes on Andrew Heaney. And I mean, I'll just say, like, he looks the part. Like, the ball looks lively coming out of his hand. The pitch mix looks good. I mean, there's guys swinging through fastballs. Yes, it's the Reds, but they're swinging through fastballs. Obviously, he's got the breaking stuff. And so, we'll get to my bold predictions because I'm going to ask you about mine and Daniel's bold predictions earlier. One of mine was Andrew Heaney under 4.00 ERA this season. Let's just say I'm feeling pretty good about that prediction 2 starts in, but I'm buying it. Again, I'm not saying Andrew Heaney's going to be a top 10 Cy Young finisher. I'm not saying he's going to be an all-star, but he looks the part. And the whiffs, the strikeouts, yes, it's the Reds, but even in his first start against the Twins, looked good there as well. And so it's hard not to like what we're seeing. So I'm going to buy Andrew Heaney on that one. So just to recap here, Gavin Lux, I'm buying, you're buying. Austin Barnes, I'm surprisingly buying the batting average. You're buying as well.
I'm holding that.
You're holding on Austin Barnes. Okay.
Yeah.
Cody Bellinger, I'm selling the hot start. You are...
I forgot what I don't know. I was torn between buying and holding. Let's say I'll buy.
Okay. Mookie Betts, we're both selling the sufferings. We think he's going to turn it around. Justin Turner, I'm holding. You're selling the struggles. You think he's going to turn that around. We're both buying Clayton Kershaw. We're both buying Andrew Heaney. So there you go. Let us know in the comments below on those ones. Buying, selling, holding, those types of players. All right, let's get ahead to the week that is coming up. Rivalry week with the Braves, so to speak. 3-game series with the Braves starting on Monday. The Braves are 5-6 on the season. They split with the Reds at home. They lost 2 of 3 to the Nationals, and then they split in San Diego as well. This game is at Dodger Stadium where, Matt, I'm not sure if you knew this. I'm sure you did because they mentioned it all the time. 19 straight home victories, I believe, for the Dodgers dating back, regular season home victories dating back to last year. Are you expecting emotions to be high for this one? We had the San Diego series last year that was early in the year. Everyone got fired up. Now we've got the Acuna Freeman thing. We've got Kenley Jansen coming back. Craig Kimbrell's in a Dodger uniform. Are you expecting emotions to be high for this Dodger Brave series?
I am, but I think it'll be different than what we saw against the Padres last year. I think this one will be more like, I don't want to say awkwardness, but obviously it's different because you have 2 players that spent up until this season the entirety of their careers, on the other team, and now, ironically, like, not only did Kenley Jansen leave the Dodgers, not only did Freddie Freeman leave the Braves, but they basically swapped, if you will, right? So I think that will make it sort of emotional. Freddie Freeman did say he's looking forward to seeing his old teammates, and Acuna, I don't know if he's traveling with a team. I think he might be on a rehab assignment as he's trying to still make his way back. But Kenley has said he's looking forward. He doesn't have any hard feelings against the Dodgers, and he understands kind of what they had to do. And obviously, it's been well documented that he did want to come back and the Dodgers were interested, but ironically signing Freddie Freeman sort of changed their calculus a little bit. They were going to have to shut some salary, which, Kenley didn't really want to wait around for, and you can't really fault him for that.
Yeah.
We were coming off a weird off season as it was. Spring training was starting and, he wanted to get settled in. So I think emotions will be high, but only like actual emotion, not like hostility that there was with the Padres.
You are right. Acuna just starting a rehab assignment tomorrow on Tuesday. He's not expected back until early May. So we won't have the Freddie Freeman, Ronald Acuna smile and hug for the cameras scenario. I kind of mentioned in the headline below, it says rivalry week with the Braves. You talked about the emotions. Do you consider the Braves to be a rival of the Dodgers? I mean, they faced 3 of the last 4 years in the postseason. Obviously, they've ended each other's seasons the last 2 years in the NLCS. The Giants are number 1 on this list. Braves, Padres, how do you have those 3 ranked as far as rivals?
Yeah, I don't see the Braves as a rival just yet. I think if they were to meet in the postseason again this year, and because of the Jansen and Freeman factor, that then it could elevate to that level. But really, yes, they met 3 of the last 4 years, but the first matchup wasn't really anything. Like, I don't think the Braves were necessarily a true threat, whereas obviously in 2020 they took the 3-1 series lead. Dodgers came back, so that sort of starts to, that's an important history note. Yeah. And then last year, the Braves ending the Dodgers' quest to sort of repeat and then going on to win the World Series themselves, that adds another layer. So if they were to meet this year, especially like in the NLCS, then I think at that point we would have a rivalry. But for me, it's not there yet.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because for me, rivalries can be associated with teams, much like the Giants, who I think are the Dodgers' biggest rival, the Padres, who I think are the second biggest rival. But it also becomes attached to players. There's individual players you come to hate on other teams, and individual players that tend to rile you up. And with a team like the Braves, there has been so much. First of all, I couldn't ever dislike Freddie Freeman because he seemed like such a nice guy. So even though he killed the Dodgers, it seemed like, I couldn't get over that. And then some of the other guys are just moving pieces. There's not like a face. When I think of the Braves, there's not a guy that I think of in the same way. There's a Tatis and a Machado and a Buster Posey and a Brandon Belt and a Brandon Crawford and, Madison Bumgarner, those types. There isn't one of those for the Braves. And if there were, a couple of them are now on the Dodgers and Freddie Freeman and Craig Kimbrell. So I'm with you on that. One other question here before we get to the on-the-field stuff and previewing the actual series. It's a quote from Dave Roberts. He got out in front of this and said, "Hey, Dodger fans, you better not be booing Kenley Jansen." I'm pretty confident I know where you stand on whether or not people should boo Kenley Jansen. I'll ask it to you this way. Do you think Dodger fans would really boo Kenley Jansen?
I mean, I think it depends on the setting. And honestly, like with Roberts' quote, first of all, I'm sure that the Dodgers are going to play, video tribute for Kenley between innings, top of the first, bottom of the first, or second, whatever, early into the game. There shouldn't be boos during that at all. There should be standing ovation, applause, thanking Kenley for his time here. But if he's coming in the 9th inning and fans booed him at that point, like, I think it would sort of be, I don't want to necessarily say justified, but at least understandable, because from that standpoint, then the fans are watching a pitcher come in who's potentially going to, depending on if he's coming in, I imagine it would be a save opportunity for the Braves. So he could end the night with a loss for the Dodgers. So I wouldn't expect fans to sort of cheer him in that moment. And I know Dave Roberts did sort of add, like, if he does get a save, like, boo him then, which I think would be sort of fair game.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because, I mean, like, look, I've been maybe as hard on Kenley Jansen as just about anybody, and sort of some of the stuff where just his performance and some of the attitude stuff when he was questioned about whether he's being a closer that I thought was justified and he sort of took personally, it seemed like. But I mean, he's gone now, and like, there's no hard feelings. It's not like he demanded his way out of Los Angeles. We were predicting, or I should say, I was predicting all offseason. I didn't think he was going to come back. I don't think the money made sense. I don't think the age made sense. He has struggled with Atlanta thus far this season. More a little bit par for the course for the Kenley Jansen experience. Coming in a 4-run game and giving up 2 runs, I think was his first appearance. So. To me, it's like there's no hard feelings. Like he says, the Dodgers will always have a special place in his heart. I'm sure if this is a guy who goes into Cooperstown, it will primarily be as a Los Angeles Dodger. And there's people that think he's going to make the Hall of Fame. That's a conversation for another day. So there were rough ups and downs in his tenure with the Dodgers, but now that he's gone, like, he has done nothing that would cause anybody, in my mind, to have justification for booing the guy. Like, he, by all accounts, wanted to come back to Los Angeles. The Dodgers, the timing of it, as you said, didn't work. They were interested, but not interested at the very second that he was ready to sign. And so, good riddance. I don't know. To me, booing is a funny thing because, like, on this one, I'm like, I just can't wrap my mind around it at all. Am I missing something? Like, what would people be booing with Kenley Jansen?
I think it would just be, like I said, more like the game situation of he's coming in. So, but yeah, like, short of that, like if he gets booed, if they play a video, a montage of his highlights with the Dodgers and stuff like that, and there's boos during there, like, that would be completely uncalled for. And I think, like you said, it wasn't, there aren't hard feelings. It's just a lot different than the Freddie Freeman situation, the Braves, where, like, the Braves just pretty much stonewalled him in negotiations type thing, and so it led to a little bit of an unceremonious ending. Whereas with Kenley and the Dodgers, it was sort of like, yeah, we want this to work, but can we find a common ground? And they just couldn't, despite maybe efforts from both sides. So it is a much different. I'll say this: the environment will be much different at Dodger Stadium for Kenley Jansen than I think when Freddie Freeman goes back to Atlanta.
See, because what's interesting to me is I actually see a lot of similarities in those two, in that you can't fault the player for the guy being in another uniform. Like, I think you would boo the player if it was a situation where, like Aaron Judge was getting booed, whatever, last week in New York because the Yankees came out and said, here's the contract we offered him, and he said no to it. So, like, when you decide to leave a team that has made just about every reasonable effort to keep you there, and then you leave, then that's one thing. Fans have a right, I think, to be frustrated and say, don't tell me to my face you want to be here, and then say no to a very reasonable contract. Now, we don't have to get into whether it was a reasonable contract, but it was a big contract. We'll put it that way. On the flip side, with Jansen and with Freeman, the fact that they are gone had nothing to do with them necessarily. Like Freddie Freeman, I think he got offered one contract like 12 months ago, and that was it, and never really had any discussion. So I don't understand how Braves fans could be mad at him. They should be mad at their general manager. Likewise, if you're mad that Kenley Jansen is gone, your frustration should be with Andrew Friedman and how the Dodgers have been constructed, not with Kenley himself. So I don't know. We'll see how it all plays out. My heart of hearts, I think Dodger fans actually love Kenley Jansen like a ton. And so I think he's going to get a very warm reception with the Dodgers when he comes to Dodger Stadium. Let's talk about the on-field stuff. And who knows, maybe we don't see him in the on-field because there's no save opportunities. We can cross our fingers for that. But let's talk Braves-Dodgers on the field and how this three-game series is going to play out. Pitching is going to be the storyline. We already talked about how good the Dodgers' starting pitching has been. The Braves have allowed 3 or fewer runs in 4 of their last 5. The lone outlier, they gave up 12 to San Diego. On the offensive side, aside from a 16-run game against Washington, they've scored 3 or fewer runs in 7 of 11 and 5 or fewer runs in 9 of 11. So not a ton of offense for the Braves. You mentioned Acuna, not in yet. Freddie Freeman, obviously gone. Those are basically their 2 best hitters, neither of which is playing. On the pitching side, they've been pretty good for the most part. On Monday, we got Huascar Ynoa. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Guy who's a career 5.0 ERA guy, 30 appearances, 23 of those starts, has never faced the Dodgers. On the other side, you've got Clayton Kershaw. In his career against the Braves, 12 starts, 81 in a third innings, 2.20 ERA. Basically has shut down all of the Braves that he's going to be facing. Ozzie Albies has faced him well. None of the other guys have. Marcell Ozuna's got a 143 career average, 7 strikeouts and 14 at-bats. So Kershaw versus Ynoa. Of the 3, you look ahead, you got Fried versus Buehler. We'll get into that. And then Morton versus Gonsolin. Ynoa versus Kershaw. This is the one you've got to feel best about, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, when you look at the series, the pitching matchups, it's interesting because you want to see how Kershaw can follow up his 7 perfect innings tonight, obviously. And then Buehler and Fried, I think, is just a big-time starting pitching matchup for both teams.
Yeah.
So, it'll be interesting to see how the first 2 games go. And it wouldn't surprise me if, honestly, there's a split, which then sets up an interesting rubber match on what will be a Wednesday afternoon, a rare midweek start at Dodger Stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. Kershaw versus Ynoa. You've got to feel good about the Dodgers. I imagine they're heavy favorites. On Tuesday, we've got Max Fried versus Walker Buehler, 2 guys that many people expect to sort of be at least in the fringes of the Cy Young conversation, more so Buehler than Fried. But Fried has 5 career appearances against the Dodgers, a 4.30 ERA across 23 innings, but he has struck out 29 guys in 23 innings. Walker Buehler, on the other hand, 3 starts against the Braves. These are regular season numbers, I believe. I don't think this includes playoff appearances. 3 starts, 19 and a third innings pitched, 2.79 ERA. The Braves have 4 players who have 7 or more at-bats against Buehler. None of them is hitting higher than 150 in that one. So Buehler versus Fried. And then the last one, Charlie Morton versus Tony Gonsolin. Morton, 4 appearances against the Dodgers, 22 innings, 4.5 ERA, 27 strikeouts. So the Tuesday and Wednesday may be a strikeout fest. Both Braves pitchers averaging more than a strikeout an inning against the Dodgers. Fried versus Buehler, Morton versus Gonsolin. Any sort of big picture thoughts just looking at those 2? We've touched on how good the pitching matchup's going to be Tuesday. What about Gonsolin/Anderson versus Morton on Wednesday?
Yeah, I think the Gonsolin-Anderson situation is going to be interesting to monitor because if Gonsolin continues to sort of, I don't want to necessarily say struggle, like his starts have just been very weird, right?
That's on brand. This is not weird. This is normal for him at this point.
You look at, the hits he's giving up, the walks, and it's like, oh man, like this guy must have allowed 5 runs. And you look at it and it's like, oh, somehow he didn't. So on one hand, like I guess you could argue it is quote unquote working, but on the other hand, like is it gonna sort of catch up to him at some point?
Yeah.
We don't necessarily know. And so Dave Roberts was asked about the tandem, and he said they're not necessarily fully married to the Gonsolin Anderson piggyback scenario, moving forward throughout an entire season. But obviously, it's working right now, and so they're going to kind of, sort of stick with it, and then they'll evaluate as they sort of keep going. Anderson still, the plan is to continue to stretch him out as a starting pitcher. So it'll be interesting to me to see, do you potentially flip them if Gonsolin sort of continues to, struggle with some command stuff? But then, you could make a counter argument is if you bring him up, we've seen him out of the bullpen, and that's probably been a little bit worse than starting. So would that make sense? Would it change things for Anderson? I know he's a career starter, but he is at least early on settled into a pretty good role.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely intriguing just to sort of monitor, how that pairing may end up taking shape in the months ahead.
Yeah, and I've said Gonsolin could be a guy that when the roster crunch comes, and we've seen Phil Bickford take a spot from Garrett Clevenger already, the Dodgers at some point are going to have 3 more relievers they're going to have to take off. And as we've said, Tommy Kahnle and Caleb Ferguson are coming back at some point. So there could be 5 more relief pitchers that get sent down to the minor leagues. 5 more pitchers, I should say. Tony Gonsolin, I joked that we should just expect high whip, low ERA for Tony Gonsolin because he's been, I'm not ever going to say it's sustainable, but at this point I think he has like 35 career starts under his belt or something, and it's always the same. So who knows there. Charlie Morton, again, a guy who has struggled against the Dodgers historically, has been a good pitcher of late, though. We're going to get to mailbag questions in a bit, but Laura has one mailbag question for you, Matt. Prediction for the Braves series. We got 3 games set. I'm terrible at all of these. I think I predicted, taking 2 of 3 from the Rockies. Got that wrong. I predicted a split in Minnesota, and I predicted losing 1 against the Reds. So I'm 0 for 3 on my series predictions, but we got 3 games against the Braves here. What do you got, Matt?
I think the Dodgers take 2 of 3. Now, just don't ask me to pick the actual 2 wins because that I could see either night going any which way.
Yeah, and we talked about 19 straight home wins. I believe the franchise record is 22 or 23. So a sweep here would get you in range to the franchise record of home wins there. I'm with you. I think 2 out of 3 sounds about right. I think the Dodgers win the Kershaw one. And then, take your pick. They're going to lose one of the next 2. I think. So we'll see with that. But let's close out the show, Matt, with some mailbag questions. Kind of hinted at it. We got a bunch of these via Twitter. As you can see, I'm at Jeff Spiegel. Matt is at mmoreno1015. You can also send them to at DodgerBlue1958. We record shows every Monday at 8:30 in the morning. And so as long as you get your questions into us before then, we'd love to answer them on the show whenever we've got time. But I'm going to start with a mailbag question of my own first, Matt. And that is something I referenced earlier. Daniel and I did some bold predictions when we were in Las Vegas, making some bets on some small sample sizes. I want to run through these briefly and just get your thoughts. And you can do buy, sell, hold if you want. Buying or selling this prediction. How about that? The first one we've sort of referenced. I said Andrew Heaney under 4.00 ERA this season. You buying or selling that bold prediction from me?
I'm buying that. I think he could very easily settle in at around 3.5.
Okay, there we go. Okay, this is Daniel's. Tyler Anderson, this is sort of in counter, I guess, to the one that I just said. But he has Tyler Anderson as having the best wins above replacement of any of the non-Big 3 starters. So basically, outside of Buehler, Urias, and Kershaw, which Dodgers starting pitcher has the highest WAR? Daniel said Tyler Anderson. Buying or selling that?
I'll have to sell that because I do think it ends up being Heaney.
Okay, there you go. We're gonna count that we're gonna send that in a text message to Daniel after that. Okay, next one. This is another one from Daniel. I'm going out of order here. He had Clayton Kershaw as a legitimate Cy Young candidate. The odds on Kershaw to win the Cy Young were 40-1 at the time. I'm not gonna say, do you think Clayton Kershaw is gonna win it? But are you buying or selling 40-1 value for Clayton Kershaw in the Cy Young race?
I'll buy that.
Yeah. Yeah, my take was I'm buying it too because I think the narrative. I think if Kershaw gets in the mix, you do the narrative, older guy, the season, yada, yada, yada.
Absolutely.
I think that carries some steam. All right, my second bold prediction, this was the spiciest one I had. Bobby Miller starting a postseason game for the Dodgers in October. Buying or selling that one?
Ooh, I'll sell that.
Okay.
But it's close. It's close.
Well, I mean, honestly, as I'm high on Heaney. I got to take my pick, right? You can't have Heaney being good and Bobby Miller starting. So I kind of contradict myself there. All right, 2 more here. Daniel has Chris Taylor making an all-star game this year. Buying or selling that?
I'll buy that. I think he's going to have another productive season. And I think his value has sort of been seen, and I think he'll continue to sort of be rewarded for that super utility role that he fills.
See, I'm selling it, and this is going to lead into my next one, just because I think the glut of Dodgers that are going to be in contention for an All-Star game and sort of the unofficial cap that will probably be on it. But my last bold prediction was that the Dodgers break the franchise record and send 7 or more All-Stars to the All-Star game. You buying or selling that one?
Let me see.
You can't be buying Chris Taylor as an All-Star and then selling the rest of these guys, right?
I'm going to sell it because I think maybe like Mookie may not make it if he doesn't like fully get going until the second half, which I think is possible.
Fair. All right, so there you go. Okay, let's get to some more mailbag questions here. No particular order here. Jerry J. Villa asks, will we see Kevin Pillar or Jake Lamb at some point this season?
I think so. Obviously, you don't want to predict injuries, but recognizing that they happen over the course of a full season, there will be opportunities for those guys to come up. And one thing to monitor, though, will be if they feel like it's getting to a point where, hey, like I've shown enough in AAA and I have my opt-out date is coming up and I know this team is interested in giving me a major league opportunity now, I think that could obviously change things. But if you ask the Dodgers from their planning, I would say yes, that they envision both of those guys being up at some point.
Not to put you on the spot, I mean, we sort of talk about these opt-out dates. Are we positive that those guys have opt-outs? I mean, some guys just are forced to sign minor league deals in which they actually don't have control. Now, they could go to the organization and say, hey, I'd like to get out of here. But do we know anything about actual opt-out dates for Lamb and Pillar?
They do. I'm fairly certain both have them, and I forgot which one. It might have been Lamb who actually has 2 opt-out dates. Okay. One that may be coming up like early May, I felt like, and then again in June or July. Okay. We'd have to double check that, but that's a great question. We should probably put a video together, kind of explaining all that. So hopefully we'll have more information then.
Yeah, the hard part here is neither of the guys is on the 40-man roster. We know the Dodgers have a 40-man roster crunch. They had to didn't have to. They chose to protect a number of minor league guys from the Rule 5 draft that ended up not happening, and so that ate into a ton of 40-man roster space. They got basically 5 guys on there who they're not expecting to contribute at any point this season. That said, right now they have 16 pitchers. When the rosters go down to 26-man, they have to get down to 13 pitchers. And so 2 of those spots are just going to disappear, but one of those spots is going to become a bench hitter. I've said the whole time I think Jake Lamb, as long as he continues to hit, which by all accounts he has been hitting in the minor leagues, I think Jake Lamb is going to be that guy. I think they find a way to get him on the 40-man roster, whether that's DFAing somebody or what. I mean, they have too many pitchers. They're going to have to figure out the pitching piece, but I do think Jake Lamb comes up. I'm not nearly as high on Kevin Pillar as other people are. He doesn't grade out great defensively. The offensive piece has never been that good. Yes, he makes highlight plays, but sort of it's like the Derek Jeter thing. You look at the underlying metrics and it's just not as good as it looks on the SportsCenter Top 10 highlight reel. And so I think yes to Jake Lamb. I'm not positive about Kevin Pillar. Although who knows? I mean, he's a guy that might stick around in the Dodgers AAA system for the entirety of the year, but that would be my take on that one. I am bored 44 on Twitter. There you go. Very bored. Sending mailbag questions. We appreciate it. Thoughts on the bullpen so far? I pulled some numbers real quick. 2.92 ERA in 37 innings pitched. They got the lowest walk rate in the league. They've got a strikeouts per 9 of more than 1 per inning and the third best fielding independent pitching. I don't know what complaints you could possibly have about the bullpen. It feels like the only times they've given up runs have been in blowouts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been, sort of what we expected coming into the season. We looked at the group, and it was one reason why, if there was any doubt as to whether they'd re-sign Kenley Jansen, it was because of the depth that they had compiled in their bullpen. Obviously, adding Craig Kimbrell solidified the closer, the defined closer role, which is ironic because the Dodgers do value a ton of versatility, but the closer spot seems to be one that they're okay sort of locking in the right pitcher.
Yeah.
Daniel Hudson, we've talked about him. He's been a little bit of a standout, impressed in some of his appearances. Trying to go through guys in my head. I mean, it's tough. Like, it's like I said, it's just been, we expected this, right?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a surprise. So credit to the guys who have obviously pitched well, but I think we all kind of thought this would be the case.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch White, like he looked good the other night until he didn't. He came in and had his breaking ball that looked like nobody could hit, and then he comes back the next inning and gives up some runs. So I think overall there hasn't been anybody out of the bullpen that I've been like, oh my goodness, this is a train wreck. This is a disaster. I mean, even Craig Kimbrell struggled in his first appearance, looked really good in his second appearance. Daniel Hudson, who you mentioned, obviously nobody's worried about. Blake Trinan. Alex Vesia has been okay so far, and so Phil Bickford just recalled. So yeah, totally positive on the bullpen.
And let's also give credit to Evan Phillips too, because honestly, looking at the roster and when we've talked about the 40-man, like I think he was somebody that we both agreed, maybe the Dodgers just DFA him because he sort of is, I want to say an average relief pitcher, but they have guys like kind of in that caliber. But he has pitched well. Like now, all of a sudden, it's like, well, you don't want to necessarily cut him loose because he'll clearly get claimed. So credit to him.
He was touching 96, 97 even maybe yesterday. I mean, if you're throwing that with that slider, I still don't know if he has a long-term future, but he's a trade piece. I mean, like he would be a top 3 to 4 guy in most bullpens in the league. And so if you're looking for relief pitching help, man, I don't know why you wouldn't be calling the Dodgers and saying, hey, we'll take that 40-man roster spot off of your hands. And I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be like a top 100 type prospect, but I think Evan Phillips could net you a pretty serious lottery ticket as a guy because, the Dodgers would obviously want to replace him with a guy that's a few years away from the 40-man roster. But I could absolutely see them doing something on that front. All right, a couple more questions here. Mark Lubinsky, this is a question that I've been fascinated by, but what are your thoughts on how the Dodgers have filled the designated hitter role so far? I went and did some research here. Justin Turner's been the DH 4 times, Max Muncy 3 times, Edwin Rios 2 times. Pretty much a rotation, JT, Rios, Muncy, JT, Muncy, JT, Muncy, Rios, JT. What are your thoughts? Is that kind of how you expected this to play out? Anything surprise you there?
I guess I kind of expected it. It's hard to answer. Like I've been most surprised that Muncy's getting time at third base.
Yeah.
So I expected Turner to DH. I thought maybe Rios would play a little bit of third base, and we joked about it on one of our other videos. Like when the Dodgers were going to potentially sign Freddie Freeman, we all thought, well, yeah, it's easy. Like just slide Muncy over to second base, and it turns out he's playing third base, if not DH. Dave Roberts did say at the beginning of the season that Will Smith is somebody who he said, I envision Justin Turner, Max Muncy, and Will Smith being the primary DH guys that will rotate through. Like you just touched on, Will Smith hasn't been in there yet. So I guess I'm surprised from that standpoint, only because Dave Roberts sort of said that was the plan. I'm sure at some point we'll get there. But no, I mean, not much surprise with it, I guess.
Yeah, and the Will Smith piece is, look, nobody's going to be surprised that's watching the show. That's the piece that bugs me. Austin Barnes has started 3 times, which is fine. If Austin Barnes wants to catch Clayton Kershaw, I'm sure he'll be starting today when Clayton Kershaw. So this will be 4 starts in 10 games for Austin Barnes, which, hey, whatever. He's been hitting the ball fine. Will Smith has been great as well. I just don't understand why Will Smith isn't DHing. Like, I mean, excuse me. Let me back that up. I understand why Will Smith isn't DHing because with Gavin Lux hitting the way he is, you essentially have to choose between Max Muncy and Justin Turner. Both of those, like Lux, Freeman, Turner, and Muncy, those 4 cannot all play at the same time if Will Smith is DHing. You've got to pick 3 of those 4. So who knows? Maybe we get a Freddie Freeman day off here pretty soon or something like that. But I just, from my perspective, you've got to find a way to get Will Smith. I know you're trying to rotate, but guess what? I don't know if this is controversial. Will Smith's a better hitter than Max Muncy. Will Smith's a better hitter than Justin Turner. Will Smith's he's one of the Dodgers' 3 or 4 best hitters in my estimation. So I understand wanting to get these guys at bats, but Will Smith has to be in the lineup more. Like, I understand you want to give him a break because he's a catcher. Fine, but DH, he should be able to DH every single day. He's not catching. Am I crazy for thinking Will Smith is a better hitter than some of these other guys?
No, I don't think so. And I know you touched on it right now at the end. I think I was going to say some of it. I wonder if they're just trying to preserve his legs.
Yeah.
For it's a long season, and yes, when you DH, it is sort of like a half night off because you're only hitting.
You're not crouching.
But I think also some of it too is trying to. I know Edwin Rios hasn't received a ton of opportunities at DH, but trying to get him some at bats. We'll see. I think if we revisit this conversation, like a month from now, we'll have a better picture of what it might really look like over the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, look, the Dodgers are, knock on wood, perfectly healthy right now, and so there isn't any room for an Edwin Rios type. We know Hanser Alberto has only played in like 2 separate games, although he seems like a fun guy in the clubhouse, which is a plus. And so, yeah, I understand wanting to get Rios at bats, that kind of thing. Again, for me, it's like, all right, well then, like, let Justin Turner catch an extra day of rest. Let Max Muncy catch an extra day of rest. Not Will Smith. All right, 2 more questions here. External Void asks, should Mookie and Trey switch spots until Mookie figures it out? We've talked about Mookie Betts and his struggles. Trey Turner had, I believe, a 27-game hitting streak, was snapped yesterday, unfortunately. But Trey Turner's been, by and large, very good. He hit leadoff, I believe, is on Saturday, and I think had 4 hits. So Trey Turner, I mean, look, maybe the question isn't should they switch spots, because I don't know if you're moving Mookie out of the 1 spot, I don't know if it's to hit in the 3 spot, but should Trey Turner be batting leadoff in your estimation?
I think so. I've been on record on, what my preference is for that order, but considering Mookie has been during his time with the Dodgers, has been most comfortable in the leadoff spot, he is sort of struggling to kind of, find his swing right now. I think you need to just leave him there because if you move him, it'll just be another sort of obstacle or hurdle that he's sort of fighting, if you will, as he tries to get going.
Yeah, so you're saying leave Mookie in the number 1 spot. Okay.
Yes, I understand. I understand like some of the I think from like a baseball standpoint, from Trey's perspective, it makes the most sense to put him lead off. But considering what's going on with Mookie right now, and just how, like I said, how comfortable he's appeared hitting first in the lineup, like you just need to let him be especially as he's sort of trying to find his swing.
Yeah, my thing is, if you move Mookie, where are you moving him to? Like, he's not hitting third. Like, as bad as he's hitting, it would be worse to have him doing that with Trey Turner and Freddie Freeman both potentially on base. Are you moving him to 5th? Are you moving him to 7th? Like, and the further down you move him, if you believe in this is a confidence game, then that makes it even worse. So I think the Dodgers are in a tough spot. I think if Trey Turner is fine and if he's not complaining and he's got a positive attitude about hitting third, then I think you just ride it out. The Dodgers are winning a bunch of games. They're scoring a bunch of runs, and you leave it like that. If we're building a lineup and you needed to win one game and your life depended on it and you didn't care about anybody's feelings, then yes, Trey Turner would be hitting first. Freddie Freeman would be hitting second, and Mookie Betts would probably be hitting like 7th in my lineup with, Cody Bellinger and Gavin Lux right behind him. So, that's that. Okay, last question here, and this is one from me. Fascinating article. You and I have talked about some of the rule changes supposedly coming down the pike. I don't know if you saw this, but they've started being more strict in their enforcement of the pitch clock rules, in their enforcement of batters not being allowed to leave the batter's box. Essentially, small sample size, 30 minutes off of game time is the reports out of the minor leagues. What are your thoughts?
I was impressed by that. I didn't think that it would be that impactful. I will add the sort of caveat that my question is, okay, I think it's a little bit easier to enforce it with AAA players and, minor league guys. Are they going to tell, an all-star, hey, like, get in the batter's box or get on the mound. We need to get this game going. I still have my doubts there. But, if they were, and if players just on their own, adhere to it and really stick to it, and you can cut off 30 minutes, then I'll be willing to revisit my stance and opposition to the pitch clock. Yeah,
your skepticism is fair. If anybody saw Kenley Jansen the other day, we all know Kenley Jansen is not a quick mover, not interested in speeding his way up to the mound, not interested in speeding his way through warm-up pitches. He got 3 warm-up pitches, and the home ump had enough, said, hey, we're done with this. Take the ball. We're going to start playing. Kenley Jansen, as you would expect, had a little bit of an attitude about it. Wasn't that thrilled. But yeah, I mean, on one hand, you could say, yeah, look, here's a guy that's enforcing the rules. He's taken way too long. Any Dodger fan that's surprised by that doesn't pay attention to how slowly Kenley Jansen moves. And yet on the flip side, we saw the reaction from Kenley Jansen. Like, that wasn't, and maybe if it was a strict rule and they said, look, there's the clock, it's at 0. This isn't complicated, Kenley. It'd be a little bit different. But I've said all along, pace of play is a big deal. I think they've started to do some things. I think we've talked about this. You and I disagree. I love miking players in the field. I love speeding the game up. I think these are all things that are going to improve the quality of the game, that are going to make it more attractive and appealing to new fans, which is what baseball desperately needs in order to grow the sport a little bit. And so, I think your skepticism is like, how is Clayton Kershaw going to respond to the first time that the home plate umpire yells at him to get back on the mound? Or, how is Justin Turner going to respond the first time the home plate umpire, gives him a warning for stepping out of the batter's box or something like that? But I think at least if you can go to them and say, here's the deal, we're going to cut game times by 30 minutes. Players got to be pumped about that. That's an extra 30 minutes that you get hanging out, relaxing, doing that kind of thing. So there we go. That's what we got. We appreciate you joining us as always. I'll do the rundown. One announcement I want to make. A couple exciting videos that we've got coming throughout the week. We'll try and post these to our podcast feed as well. But we've got interviews lined up with a couple of the Dodgers' top prospects who are in the minor leagues and catching up on how their early season stuff has gone, what they're looking forward to in the future. So stay tuned for that. Again, that'll be on our YouTube page, Dodger Blue 1958. So subscribe, ring the notification bell so you see when those are posted. And also make sure you subscribe, rate, and review anywhere you get your podcasts. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. Just search for DodgerHeads. We'd greatly appreciate it. That's Matt Moreno. My name is Jeff Spiegel. As always, we appreciate you. We'll see you next time.